You go fresh? You gonna be fresh? Got the dance
Zane,
going?
that's
Come
not
on.
how we open the show, Zane. That's not how the show opens right there. It opens like this. Hi, it's Dallas Winston, BloodyElbow.com. I'm joined by well, half of them are finely dressed, prestigious looking, and that, of course, is Connor the Rabbi slash Mr. Rogers Rubish. Hello,
Rabish.
sir.
Connor
Rabbi.
Rabish. Yeah.
Tell
That's
me how
not
you are today, my friend, besides luxuriously dressed, adorned in fine threads.
very scholarly, as you can see today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of
I don't
obvious.
know. You know what I discovered doing my own podcast? That asking people how they are is one of the worst ways to begin a broadcast conversation. You know what I mean?
So I like to ask it stupid, like I'll throw in some rabbis or Mr. Rogers. So that's the
Yeah, there you
next
go.
step. That's
That's
the
true.
next step up.
Okay, I'm doing well. I'm doing well, and actually, um, I'm looking forward to this card. Looking through it, I see quite a few compelling matchups. It's not replete with name value, which is just kind of the norm for UFC cards these days, particularly these fight night ones. But it's got some interesting stylistic clashes on it. So I am looking forward to this card.
Mr. Simon, Mr. Zane Simon.
The
Yo,
Zane
dog.
Simon.
What up, dog? What up, player?
Mm-hmm. Was I supposed to offer something more than that?
I don't know. I just gave you a moment of silence. You could do what you wanted to. It's kind of trite now. Connor, I open all the time asking everyone how they are, and Connor just kind of explained how that's a stupid thing. So
Yeah,
I
it's
don't want to
true.
know how you guys are doing. Let's just jump into the card. That's what we're here for. People are always just going to grit their teeth for whatever stupid shit we say in this first minute anyways. Let's take a
Yeah.
note from Connor and try to be impotent.
All right.
All right, so we're going to talk about the UFC Fight Night Dublin card. There's about 10 names for it. What is Fight Night 46? There's like three names for all these Fight Night cards. Some people call it UFC Fight Night 46. Some people call it
45.
UFC Fight Night. Is it 45? I thought last night was
No, it's
45.
46. Last night was 45. Connor, come
Oh
on.
my
Get
God.
your shit together.
Boom, Connor, take your tie off.
The numbering system is clearly broken. We just need to
Well,
start naming these things
the
McGregor versus.
problem is that for whatever reason, and well, it's the UFC's fault that they've taken to calling their tough finales fight nights in press releases, but they themselves don't officially number them as fight nights. So some sites like I think Sherdog was the big one doing it, were numbering them themselves in the fight night numbering system when the UFC themselves weren't. So the UFC will number this is 46, and then it just gets all fucked.
How far are we really going to go with the numbering system? I mean, even for
I
pay-per-views, when we hit 200, are we going to keep going past? Are we going to say UFC 213?
I probably with the pay-per-views because that's such an easy one to keep numbering. I don't see that stopping. But I already only ever refer to the fight nights now as the city they're in because I also assume that half the time the main event's probably gonna get canceled, and I don't want to have to relabel everything for the main event names.
What if they go
I
back to the same city? Numbers will get involved.
No,
That's
it's just and then I assume people are smart enough to keep dates in their mind, like know how dates work. Like hopefully they're not going back to the same city twice in the same month.
I
Although if it was in Las Vegas, I suppose they would.
I
You know what?
mean, it's better than the alternative because remember when they started to come up with a catchy name for each one, like Vengeance and
Yeah,
Redemption, and that got old after like three cards.
yeah,
I think that's okay for pay-per-views. Boxing still does that. You know,
yeah.
literally they're running out of words that include the letters MAE to use for Mayweather fights now. So when Mayweather fought Maidana the first time, it was Mayweather versus Maidana, Mayday. And now this time they're rematching, so now it's Mayhem. And I don't know where they're going to go next because they're running out of shit to.
Maybe they'll start doing it like how they name cars, where they just take like random words from other languages that sound kind of cool and use that as like
Maya.
their
I don't know. Yeah,
I'd be
lingo.
okay with that. Prius, UFC 213, Prius.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
You know what?
buying that.
I think it's actually a very clever strategy on the UFC's part. I'm not going to give them the credit of saying they had this in mind when they started numbering their events, because that wasn't even Zuffa's idea. They did that pre-Zuffa. But it makes it so that the UFC and their name is the focus of the event. we all associate, like when we think of our favorite title fights, we're like, oh yeah, back at UFC 167. Whereas in boxing, you don't remember even like the venue or anything so much as you remember, oh, I remember when, Julio Cesar Chavez fought Meldrick Taylor the first time. That was crazy. It's all about the fighters.
It's true. And
I
I
actually
mean, that's
don't mind the numbers thing for that reason. It's just simple. Maybe throw
I
in
don't
the
mind
name
it.
of the main event.
Doesn't bother me.
well, and
But
that's
what are
it.
you guys
That's
doing? We're
everything
supposed to
the
be
UFC
talking
wants
about
to
one
do.
fight card. You guys are
Oh,
totally off.
so do you want to talk about the last night's fight card first before we get into like this whole new experience that Dublin's going to give us and change our lives?
We can, except one of our panel members is ill-equipped to do so.
No,
Yeah,
no.
somebody's
I'm
not a real
ill-equipped.
fan.
I'm not ill-equipped. I'm a perfectly equipped control group. I am standing in. I'm standing in for the overwhelmed fan. So now you get the opportunity to tell me, the overwhelmed fan, which fights to check out from last night's event.
I
UFC Fight Night, Cerrone versus Miller.
honestly don't think at this point that you can, in any reasonable capacity, stand in for the overwhelmed fan.
Watch the whole main card, and definitely the last two fights were money, right up
Shit,
your alley,
watch the
striking.
whole undercard too. I mean, there were no bad fights on this card.
No,
How did
there's
I know he spoilers. I know he lost, but how did Jim Miller look? Because I've been a little worried about him lately.
He did not look great. He looked. Yeah. I
I
was gonna
thought
say
it was more of a case of that was the greatest Cerrone has ever looked. Cerrone
Yeah,
has
where is
always
this-
had. Huh?
Where's this knockout version of Cerrone coming from? Cerrone's never been a knockout artist.
Actually, though, it was weird when he first came into the UFC. I think he had one TKO, and it's
He's-
because of
Yep.
the signature Cerrone style. He'd blast somebody and then jump on and strangle
Yeah.
the shit out of
But
them.
now he's like putting people out, like with single shots and stuff.
Dude, last night was it was the greatest Cerrone performance ever, because you know how he'll show flashes of one certain tool or a technique. He had a couple last night, and he was strategic. So I don't know. I'm assuming that was a lot of Jackson, Winklejohn stuff. But he was throwing I always call it a hands-free knee, because you don't reach out for any kind of contact, just a step-in knee, no hands. He was throwing that to counter Miller's right hand. And if you think about how ballsy that is, to go into range and sneak your knee up under his elbow, and it was effective as hell. I mean, I want to say he landed 3 of them right off the bat.
Yeah, it was really. I mean, and that's the thing because he did have his typical slow start. A lot of people even thought Miller won the first round. I would say. I mean, Cerrone, the first 2 minutes of the fight, he was not in the fight, but his use of those stepping knees were what stopped Miller from maintaining aggression. They drove Miller onto the outside where he sort of tried to settle into a point kickboxing battle with Cerrone, which was never something he was going to win.
I thought he started okay because they were going at it at first.
Yeah,
I want to
but
say
Miller
he
was
slammed.
able to get inside and pop Cerrone a few times, and it was really his use of that knee that started to drive Miller off. I mean,
So it was brilliant, and then he started using the front snap kicks and teeps in beautiful ball of the foot right to the sternum. And there was a little controversy. One landed almost, it's hard to say obviously. On the replay, you could see it was obvious. Live time, it was somewhere around the belt line. But it was kind of weird because it was Miragliotta. He stopped it, but it wasn't like your typical. It was almost like he jumped in because Miller turned around, crumpled, went down. And really, that was a legal blow. The fight almost should have been stopped right there. And then, I don't know why. Maybe he realized, but he didn't do the usual stop, take your time. It was like, hey, are you ready to go? Or you good? Because you got to fight right now.
Yeah.
Props to Miller, though. He got back up. Cerrone kept throwing that, and then what he was doing is setting up a beautiful high kick that just ended everything. The world ended after that. And it was crazy because that was Jim Miller in his hometown, and Miller's a scrappy, kind of a proud guy, and to see him not only lose but to get knocked out in front of his hometown crowd that's got to be tough for Jim.
Yeah. He seems like the kind of guy who would be much more difficult in front of his home crowd.
Yep, I agree. And then Edson Barboza went all Katsunori Kakuno crescent kick. Just his toes like grazed I think he sliced open some of Dunham's intestines. I mean, you could see his toes graze across, but Dunham was cooked after that, went down. It was beautiful. Those two fights in particular were near masterpieces, but the whole card was really good.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I mean, yeah, there's not enough I can say about it. Quite frankly, it was one of those fighters like I left. I had to go run an errand for Lucas Martin's Alex White after the first round. And after the first round, I said as I was like leaving, I tweeted, I was like, I know this fight's gonna end in an awesome KO, but I had shit to do. I'll be back in like 15 minutes. I come back and there's the GIF waiting on the internet of Martin's landing that awesome combo and Alex White's legs giving out and him spilling to the canvas, and it was
Martins is a scary man. He when I was still training at George Gurgel MMA, that was George's last fight under the Strikeforce banner. He fought Martins, who's a lot bigger.
No,
than
that's Adriano Martins. This is Lucas Martins.
Oh! I'm thinking of the wrong person.
Yeah.
Embarrassing. I am
Take
the
your sweater off. Take your tile. Take your sweater off.
That's right.
I am the overwhelmed fan. I really am.
Yeah.
That's that point.
Lucas has improved a lot. I mean, he kind of started out as a guy who was, very likely to eat two to deliver one in the UFC. I mean, he beat Jeremy Larson in a fight that was fun, but basically looked like brawling on an ice rink for all the technique that they put into it.
Yeah.
And he's really tightened up his Muay Thai game a lot and gotten a lot better moving defensively in the pocket while throwing shots. He still eats a lot, but Alex White was eating 5 to deliver one and could not sustain
Who was Martin's last fight? Because I believe I actually do remember Lucas Martinez.
He fought Hernandez, Junior Hernandez.
Okay, yeah.
At bantamweights, this was up his first fight at featherweight, which is a much better place for him, and he tooled Hernandez and tooled White too.
Having only seen the results of the event and not having seen the fights yet, I have to say that it's a bummer to me that Barboza and Cerrone already fought and that it ended in such a dumb way. Because it still seems like it would be an incredible matchup if Barboza didn't flinch like he's never had a punch thrown at him before and get knocked down by a jab.
I'm of the opinion though, I don't mind. I would watch that fight again. I look at I think in MMA, to me that's something that kind of bugs me. Like when Frankie Edgar fought for the title, whatever, and after that people are like, this is his last one because there's no. To me, whoever fucking beats the contenders, I don't care if they do it 10 times, put him in with the champ again. That doesn't bother me, especially because I also think fighters are the better fighter that night. There's times when guys are on fire. There's other times when guys are just not into it. Injuries, personal shit going on, whatever. So I have no problem with seeing guys fight again. Obviously, if I don't want to see BJ Penn and Frankie Edgar fight again. That's an example. That's a little extreme for me. But all right, let's bang through this bad boy. What you think?
All right. Absolutely.
All right. We're gonna start out with the undercard. Is this the first fight I thought? Oh, okay. So Josh Sampo, the Gremlin, versus Patrick, the Hooligan Holahan. The Hooligan Hoolaganahan.
Nice way to jumping on that, Dallas.
That's right. That's why I'm here, just for the witty remarks like that.
Mm-hmm.
Zane, let's start with you since you're feeling saucy over there.
All right, I am feeling saucy. I need to go out and buy myself some fresh clothes to show off. But anyway, moving to actual fighter commentary here. Holahan's one of those guys that he reminds me a little bit of who was it that just fought Borg? Ray Borg.
Got destroyed, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember who that was.
I'm not. But okay, so there was a guy who just fought Ray Borg, got destroyed.
I think you're kind of making your point by not being able to remember his name.
Yeah, and he was a solid vet on the regional scene. Had won a few fights, had a good winning streak going, had been competitive. But you look at him and you watch him fight, and you're just like, you don't have the raw tools to compete at the UFC level. You don't have the raw athleticism, the speed, especially at flyweight, where you have to be fast as shit to compete. And Sampo is a guy that the moment he got signed, watching tape of him, it's like this guy's a gatekeeper to the top 10. I mean, that is Josh Sampo. He's fast, he's strong, he's a great technical wrestler, and the thing that's best about him and that makes him a guy who's going to stick around and win a lot in the UFC is that he's one of the most defensively sound fighters at flyweight. And so for a guy like Holahan who's going to have to depend on his opponent making mistakes, Sampo's about the worst matchup you can ask for.
So you're picking Holahan?
Yeah. Totally.
You read that you read that perfectly, Dallas.
Rabbi Rubish, what do you think?
I think Zane's point about Holahan is very well made, and that's kind of exactly the way I feel about him. Almost the unfortunate thing is, and it's fortunate for Patrick Holahan and guys like him that they get their shot in the UFC. That's great for them, but viewing the UFC as the uppermost tier of fights, it is somewhat unfortunate that we now have a lot of fighters of this caliber just all over the UFC who don't really feel like they belong there, who aren't or really just aren't ready. He does strike me as the kind of guy who will be a veteran, as Zane said, on the regional circuit and will have a very good career as a regional fighter, but he's just not like athletic or dynamic enough. Like he can't adapt the way that a UFC flyweight needs to. It's the fastest division in the UFC, and the flyweights in the UFC are mostly the fastest flyweights in the world. So you really need that athleticism to compete. And Sampo, he is athletic. He probably gave Makovsky his toughest fight yet since coming to the UFC. And Makovsky has been on a tear. And Makovsky still looked good, but Sampo hung with him. And really, his biggest fault in that fight was that he couldn't stop Makovsky's takedowns, because even though it was on the ground, his defensive guard is insane. I mean, even if you take the guy down, he's going to be looking for submissions, and it's very difficult to hit him while he's on his back. I think it's difficult to not pick Sampo in this fight, and I'm personally really looking forward to watching Sampo develop. As it stands, I think Zane's correct. He's like the cookie cutter gatekeeper for flyweight right now. I'd love to see if he can progress beyond that in the coming years, because he is a really solid fighter.
Yeah, it's a really tough debut. I mean, as far as Holahan, I actually got to watch a little bit of tape on him, and some of his opponents were solid, and a couple of them were not so much. But the thing that struck me overall is he's mean. He's a fighter. He might not be real polished or super athletic or gifted transition fighter, but that's why I always just say I'm in the show me stage, because we've seen some guys, Ray Borg, Max Holloway, who had worse credentials, way worse. Holloway, I think, came in with four fights in Hawaii. So I've just tried to be a lot more open-minded. But that being said, there's no way you can't pick Sampo. I mean, Sampo's got wins over, Antonio Bonelos, fucking choked out Alexis Villa, I believe. I mean, so Sampo's for real. And I think it's fair because Sampo's due for a less venomous opponent. So it's going to be good for him to showcase his skills, but I think it's a really, really tough debut for the hooligan. But I'm as always, he's got the credentials in the background that I'm fine with him getting a shot. Definitely open to see what he can do with it.
What's kind of sad about this, about a fighter like Holahan, is that if you look at I hate that this is MMA's origins are in submission grappling, and yet if you look at a regional guy's record and you see a lot of wins by submission, it's almost a sure bet that he's not UFC caliber. Because on the regional circuit, that generally means we have a guy who relies on his submission game, who is a solid jiu-jitsu guy, and that type of fighter cannot make it with just that skill set in the UFC anymore.
I think you have to look and see. Well, but what I was going to say kind of contrasts with what you were going to say. If I looked up and saw a guy debuting and he had triangles, arm bars, stuff from guard, versus if a guy had 4 or 5 rear naked chokes in a guillotine, to me those are more what I always call gimme subs. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have a ton. It's not that nothing against those subs, but the triangles and arm bars, you have to have position. There's this process flow you have to follow, which is just vaguely indicative of more knowledge. And the reason I hesitated to say that is shit, nowadays maybe the rear naked chokes and guillotines are really the more sensible,
Yeah.
chokes to go
That's
after because
exactly it. If you look at the rate of submissions in the UFC, there's almost no triangles or arm bars anymore. It's almost entirely if it's a submission, it's a rear naked choke. We have more triangle choke or head arm triangles, things from top control, and a lot of guillotines, which are less and less the I can't stop a takedown guillotine and more I have a really good guillotine. In this modern era of MMA. When I see guard submissions prevalent on a guy's resume before he comes to the UFC, it typically tells me that he doesn't have a premium placed on getting up off his back, and he's faced a lot of guys who are not that good at jiu-jitsu. Because
that is sad. This is all sad. It truly
isn't that
is.
a bummer? Because you want that to be like, oh, a submission artist is coming to the UFC, but the guy who has a good guard is almost obsolete in
Well,
MMA.
I'll say this though. And for me, it's because it's always about watching tape for me, and so I'm always hoping that when I do, like I see this and I go and look at the guy, I'm always hoping what I'll see is like an Ian Entwistle who lost to Dan Hooker, of course, to reinforce your point, but it's somebody like that who just takes absurd risks to go for really dangerous subs. That's
Yeah,
what I want to see.
I
want
like
to
that.
because I want to see the next Imanari, the next Paul Harris, the next guy who's going to come out there and who's just going to like fight often in ways that are insanely stupid, but are so have the potential to be devastating.
But if you're going to be a submission artist, you either these days in the UFC, it's like you either have to go for control and maybe grab the occasional submission, like the route that Damian Maia's been taking lately, or the route that Yushin Okami took, or you have to be, as you say, just a balls to the wall, huge risk taker submission artist who's going to jump on things and snatch them up.
Yeah.
Don't you think judging has a big part? Don't spend too much because we're going off on a tangent on top of another tangent. But to me, the way fights are judged is a big reason why the guard is, or the submission grappler, the guard game. Submissions from guard are almost extinct nowadays.
Partially, but honestly, like you think of Sarah Morris versus Alexis Dufresne, that fight recently, in which Morris had to spend a lot of that fight being active in the guard, and she won it. I don't know that I honestly see that as much as I see guys getting just absolutely crushed and stifled from top control by guys who have a little bit of submission defense and better top control.
There's no question the playing field is more level now, and learning, the submission defense, especially if you're a strong wrestler in top control, is a good way to shortcut that. But anyways, I'm going to cut that off before we get to. We only got one fight under our belt. We're moving on. Cody Donovan versus Nikita Krylov, a.k.a. Al Capone. Connor, take us away.
Oh.
I want a technical breakdown of this from you, too. I better hear about, some great footwork.
I'm fine with just whatever, Connor.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. This fight kind of sucks, right? I don't know. Nikita, is it Krylov now? We've decided it's Krylov, I guess. Krylov knocked out Walt Harris, which is it's whatever. I don't know. The kick was kind of cool.
Well said, man. Well said. It's whatever.
I don't really know where to put it. He got absolutely worked by OSP, and Donovan got absolutely worked by John Vellante. Neither of those are good signs, really. I mean, OSP is not a bad loss to take. Then again, Donovan also got worked by OSP. So both of these guys have been finished in the first round by Alvin St. Both of them, I guess it's a really smart fight matchmaking-wise. It should be who needs to leave the UFC and get some more seasoning on the regional circuit fight.
Well, I think you're being a little. Krylov is young. I think he's one of the youngest. I lost count within the top 10 of the youngest guys, and Kyokushin guy with some, he's got a little personality and some flair. So I'm okay with with him, and I think he's finished everything in the first round too.
Krylov is I'm unfair to him because in my mind I think of him as a guy who will never learn to be a good submission grappler. In my mind, I think of him as a guy who will never be good on the ground, and so will always be incredibly one-dimensional, which is not fair. I mean, he could come into this fight and show really improved grappling chops. I'd love to see that. But getting submitted with a Von Flue choke as easily as he did, it's not a good sign.
Doesn't he have some crazy subs on his record? Zane,
Yeah,
give me your...
he's got a bunch of weird, like, and I had said this a while ago, and a bunch of people tried to like shot me down for it, but I still think it's true. Is that one of the worst places to trust submission records and submission like wins is the Eastern European circuit, like the Russian, the Ukrainian, just that whole area. Their submission grappling is a lot of it is bad, and we get like. People then look at guys like Nurmagomedov and Kabalov and Bagatinov, and they're like, oh, no, look, these guys, they know how to grapple. They know what they're doing on the ground. And it's like, yeah, kinda. They know Sambo really well, and they know top control, and they know wrestling really well, and they're really good at surviving. But you look at a lot of the other guys on there, and you look at a lot of the stuff that they're hitting and a lot of the groundwork that they're doing, and it is so sloppy and so just out of control.
It's not all Sambo.
Some geographical bias there.
It's not all Zane Simon is a xenophobe. It's not all Sambo and judo and wrestling in Eastern Europe too. Like a lot of these guys come from Kyokushin or like Kudo, Daido Juku, which is not really placing as much premium on the judo as it is on headbutting each other and smashing people in the face with a silly helmet on. I'm just gonna say, when you look on Nikita Krylov's record and you see submission Achilles lock 29 seconds of round 1, that's a guarantee that opponent was a terrible fighter.
Look it up, because either that or Krylov's got some big balls. He's falling back for an Achilles. Serious.
Yeah, but that shouldn't work in 30 seconds into the first round. You're both fresh. You shouldn't. His
opponent is 1-4 and has lost. Every fight. Actually, lost 3 in a row leading up in the first minute of the first round.
We'll give that to Connor. Put your tie back on, Rabbi.
All right.
You're one up after being a couple in the hall. But okay, yeah, I got you. Zane, did you want to roll through the specs on this one?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, I guess like if I'm picking it, and I do feel like I have to pick it, I want to pick Krylov. The big reason being that he's got a great chin so far. He's shown to not be terribly chinny, and he'll scrap like nobody's business, even though he throws great kicks and he throws some of the worst punches that you'll ever see.
Kyokushin punches. They look like a Kyokushin guy who's trying to punch somebody in the head for the first
he's
time.
Got this like he does what I don't know. I'm amazed that people do this, but he's got that thing where he'll like throw both arms at the same time and lead with his face.
Yeah.
It's called the fucking Hadouken.
Yeah.
But you can see that in a lot of Kyokushin guys. If you watch even like Andy Hoog had some really stiff, awkward hands. Like his punching was really uncomfortable looking.
Bruce Leroy, Zombie Prophet, gifted up. Bruce Leroy threw a Hadouken punch against someone.
Oh yeah, really? Leroy does some crazy shit for fun. But at the end of the day, Leroy is still usually like pretty technically solid. He's a pretty stable kickboxer, and one who actually uses his distance well by getting low and throwing long, straight punches. Krylov throws. He can shock you because he's, like I said, his kicks he snaps them and he throws them quickly, and he can get way up to somebody's head, which a lot of guys at light heavyweight and stuff like that can't really throw their legs above their opponent's elbow. So he can kind of shock some guys with that. And Donovan has just not looked good at all. Donovan's just a sprawl and brawl guy, and I don't know. I mean, I'd like to see Krylov win this just because I think there's something there to be built upon, but not a lot. It's not a fight I'm terribly excited for.
Zane and I agree. We're both going to pick Krylov then, just because he has more upside than Donovan.
Yeah, I mean, Krylov's 22, Donovan's 33, and they're both in the same place right now.
Well, that was a fucking roundabout way for both you guys. I'm picking Krylov with confidence. To me, I mean, I was saying that to be a dick jokingly, but honestly, there's something. The UFC will look at you if you have a big record, big wins.
Yeah.
Krylov has that. and realistically, what you're saying, the European scene, there aren't a lot of, everyone says he doesn't have any top wins. Those people don't exist, and where Krylov can't go out and get a fight with whoever people, that's not going to happen. So you're gonna rack up a good record, and if you're gonna do that against a guy you can smoke, I think it's kind of gangster to latch an Achilles lock with 30 seconds into the first round. And going back to what you guys were saying about the submission fighter, I kind of like Krylov in the fact that he's a little old school. I mean, he's just going to go out and go balls out and look for a first round finish. So Al Capone. So all three of us, really, because you guys sounded a little hesitant. Like
no, I mean, I have no reason to think Donovan's going to win this, but I don't have any reason to think that Krylov is going to look like, I don't know. It's just one of those fights where it's, I don't know.
I can't handle any more middle of the road opinions from you on this, Zane.
It's a shit fight between shit light heavyweights, and I hope that somebody looks great.
See, there you go. Zane comes off as the nice guy. You see how I manipulated that. You see the monster he really is. Actually, I'm okay with this because OSP has always been good. I think he's been proven that. Tough matchup for Krylov. So I'm okay with Krylov. I'm still riding with him. I'm fine. I don't have anything against Donovan, but I do agree that he needs to show me something here if he wants to stick around for a while. Moving on to the next one, Trevor Hot Smith Sauce. That's not right. Trevor Hot Sauce Smith. Well, it's like a tongue twister. Who can possibly get that combination of words correct?
Do not repeat.
Anyway,
don't even try.
I was so rudely interrupted. He's taking on Thor Trang. Zane, go ahead and go first from this, even though you're getting a little lippy over there.
Whatever. Like I need that from you.
All right, come on. Let's all be friends. Let's regather. Okay. Let's recenter ourselves, and let's be
so.
Nice
so middleweight's got a lot of dudes in it, and they're a lot of just kind of some dude guys.
A lot of bros.
A lot of bros who like to throw down and have no discernible skill that is really targetable. Trung's nice. I mean, he's fun because he works well in the clinch and he's got a better than advertised wrestling game. Really, he's got a really aggressive wrestling game. And he throws hard in top control. He's got great ground and pound. So he's got some skills. I'm not sure that he's developing those skills quite in the way that a lot of people expected. At one point, he was targeted as a pretty hot prospect a few years ago. And Smith is just kind of he's evolved from like a really workmanlike submission wrestler into just an ugly sprawl and brawl fighter. Like he's kind of regressed lately. So I'd pick Trung to win that fight. I don't think Smith is showing anything good. I mean, Talis Latis absolutely just put a whooping on him last fight out. And Latis looks great these days, but it's still, I don't know. I'm hoping to see Trung show a little bit more polish on his skills. And Smith, he looks regressed.
Rabbi?
Yeah. What Zane said. Smith hasn't done anything to impress me, which I feel bad saying that. Again, I know that I recognize every once in a while I'll say something really harsh and realize that these are real people with real jobs in the UFC, and I don't want to make it sound like they're worthless or anything, but Trevor Smith is I don't think he's a UFC caliber fighter, to be quite honest. He had a competitive fight with Brian Houston, who, while athletic and talented, is nowhere near ready for the UFC yet. He just does not have the polish. And Smith won a split decision. Like, he barely won a fight against Houston. And I think it was a fight that felt like a split decision. It felt like this could go either way, but both guys did well and not well enough to...
Well, it honestly felt like a fight that Houston could have won at any time had he been willing to be more aggressive.
Yeah, it just felt like Houston didn't have the experience to know what to do at what time, and that Smith just let him have those opportunities. So that's not a good sign for somebody in Smith's position who is 16 fights now into his professional career, and he certainly didn't look any better than he did against Houston, against Talis Laitis, who, as Zane said, pieced him up with ease. Trung, on the other hand, is, I think, going to stick around for a long time as a really fun action fighter. He is that kind of guy who, we were saying with submission artists, he's not purely a submission artist, but he's the kind of guy who will just go for it. whether it's a ground and pound or a position change or a submission attempt or a knee or something. He's just going to go for it, and he does it with relatively good technique. He's controlled, but he's an opportunist, and I love watching guys like him fight. I hope that even if he loses a bunch in a row, he doesn't get cut, because it's basically assured that if he loses, it's going to be a fun, competitive loss or a stunning finish, because if you give him a chance to get into the fight, he's going to keep trying until the final bell. So, trying, and then maybe this will be a chance for... They're not going to cut Smith. What am I even saying? They don't cut people anymore. But Troying pretty much has this fight in the bag the way that I see it.
Smith might be getting close to that, though. He's on kind of a poor streak.
Yeah.
So I forgot. I got to start reading the betting odds. Nate was all like, "You're stupid. I'm going to fire you. Read the betting odds. Go to hell." Fucking Nate. So let me go backwards here. For the first fight, Sampo and Holahan. What? He says that shit. You guys know? Just kidding.
Yeah,
He's a good guy.
He does threaten to fire us on a very regular basis.
Yeah.
I've been
Sampo's the big favorite. Minus, he's going to average at about minus 200, whereas Holahan is somewhere right in the plus 160 to 170 range.
Those are pretty good odds on Holahan, honestly. Like that's a bettable fight for Sampo.
Yeah, it actually is. Donovan and Krylov is pretty close. It's almost dead even. Minus, either of them are anywhere between minus 105 and minus 120. Thor Trong gets a pretty solid push at minus 180 to minus 170, with Trevor Smith averaging at about plus 150.
And honestly, I think that's not a bad bet on Trong either, because he's pretty much... I'll make him my lock of the card. I think Trong has this in the bag. I really do.
The only reason that I do worry about that a little is that he's very willing to like get in and mix it up with guys, and Smith hits pretty hard. He doesn't do it. His technique isn't consistent enough to find guys, like to really put someone away, but he will just sit there and throw his hands as hard as he can.
It's kind of quick and snappy, right? Not like good technique, a lot of hip torque, like snap. And he does kind of seem like a guy who maybe wasn't the best striker, really focused on that, and it almost kind of screwed up his game a little bit as a new element, but maybe he's still kind of finding that. So I ain't mad at you, Trevor Smith. I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing what he'll do against Thor, a guy who will gladly, grapple with him till the cows come home. So that might actually even favor
these should all be fun fights. That's the thing that I don't want to we've been down on some of the guys as like prospective talent, but these fights should all be fun.
Well, and that's even what I said before the card. The card is almost entirely compelling matchups. Like regardless of the guy's futures or their prospects or their name value, these are almost all really interesting matchups style-wise. So it should be a fun card to watch almost from top to bottom.
Yeah, and I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say Trevor Smith is a pretty decent wrestler. Like he's got he wrestled somewhere, and so to me that might make it interesting because in the grappling exchanges he might find himself on top more, and that from a fight perspective standpoint will be compelling because Thor is a real good transitional, creative, aggressive grappler. So yeah, this could be the makings of a good fight.
Yeah.
Let's move onward. Cathal Pendred versus Mike King. Whose turn is it? Who wants it? Someone take the helm. Run with it.
Okay.
You both suck.
I gotta ask right off the bat, Dallas, you bastard. Does anybody know anything about Mike King?
Not other than he's undefeated and hasn't really fought any big names.
Connor, anything for me?
That.
Well, he's got a lot of wins by submission on the regional circuit. So
come on, let's not lie. We're all sitting here looking at your dog.
So I'm gonna assume that Pendred's gonna grind out a decision and win this because Pendred's shown himself to be a pretty great athlete without a lot of finishing skill, but with a sort of Andy Couture-like game plan of wall and brawl.
And this is like the Holahan fight. It's nothing bad against Mike King, but of course, when you see, a guy who's fairly experienced like Pendred, and we know a little bit about, and then a guy who's 5-0, you don't often see a guy debut in the UFC, the premier mixed martial arts organization in the world, with only 5 fights. Yeah. Not mad at him, not anything bad, but to me, that's like, you got the opportunity, show us something on that. So I like that. I'm going to coin that, the show me. I'm in the show me phase. Yeah.
And Pendred's not just experienced. I mean, he's had all of his fights in, recently all of his fights in Cage Warriors, which Cage Warriors and Cage Contender both have pretty solid matchmaking. I mean, they tend to put
they're
guys.
Legit. Sorry to interrupt you. They're
no,
super
you're
legit orgs
you're
over
fine. They tend to put guys through good tests. Like they don't really protect guys the way that some American organizations do in order to sell them to the UFC.
I got to say, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I'm making a guess here, but wouldn't you say Cage Warriors is probably the biggest European feeder league for the UFC?
Oh yeah, Cage Warriors has become much like Jungle Fights. It's become one of those places where you win a title and you hold that title down for a day, and the UFC is going to be knocking at your door.
RFA.
Which is cool. I like that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it should work. So we're all taking Pendred here?
Yeah, but not for any, like, I can't really, like, call that a strong Pendred. Oh yeah, Pendred's going to take it. I haven't seen King. Holahan I've seen. King, I haven't watched any footage of him at all. And
Yeah, so it's the unknown factor. It's not that Pendred's the greatest thing ever, but we're all a little bit familiar with him enough to know, what he can do. But King is just
he's shown himself to be a great athlete who doesn't get knocked out. At which point, I kind of assume that he's going to win fights against unproven talent.
You have to go out and beat him. He's not going to hand away a win to anyone.
Yeah.
Connor, did you have anything to add on this? I don't know if you...
Not in particular.
Cool. All right,
Pendred for the exact same reasons.
Right on. And Pendred is mild favorite, minus 165 to 170. And Mike King is pretty much flat at plus 140, 145 in some spots. Moving up next, Phil Harris and Neil Seery. Is Seery the cat that debuted against Pickett?
Yep.
Yeah, and looked pretty solid.
Yeah, he did actually. So and that's a perfect example because we were having this conversation when Neil Seery was going to debut. Exact same combination. He fought a killer in Brad Pickett, did not win, but now I have his name, kind of etched in to the point where, all right, I'm open to this dude and I'm going to keep my eyeballs on him for a little bit. I don't know whose turn it is. I feel like I should be fair. Connor, you're trying to say something. You go.
I'll take it. Seery versus Pickett was kind of like Caceres versus Faber, where it didn't seem to make any sense at the time for the upcoming guy, but it really, I think, probably did a huge boost, as you say, for his name recognition. The fact that he hung with Pickett, and that after that fight, a lot of people were saying, wow, he did a lot better than I expected him to do. Again, and Brad Pickett's an established, tough fighter. Granted, I'm not trying to say that Pickett is Faber's level, but Seery isn't Caceres level either. So take both of them down a few notches. It's a similar type of matchup. And but the thing that makes this one interesting is that Seery and
Sorry, time out. Zane, is his audio coming through all like he's talking in Klingon, or is it just on my end?
It's just on your end. I'm hearing him fine.
All right, sorry, Connor.
Which probably means that the recording sounds like Klingon. It's your computer recording, right?
I guess.
Well, it's YouTube, YouTube server recording, so hopefully it should be totally fine.
Okay. Well, so if anybody can't hear me, just pretend some really smart shit is getting said during all of this. Yeah. The thing that makes this interesting is that Seery and Harris fought once before, and they fought in, what was it? Bama. Yeah,
Bama 3.
There we go. And Harris beat Seery by decision. Granted, it was much earlier in Seery's career. Seery is still relatively inexperienced compared to Harris, who at the time and still now is a real veteran. How many fights has Harris had now? 32?
35.
35. So, I mean, Harris is one of those guys who is the real regional veteran. I mean, and even after he probably will before too long get booted from the UFC, he's probably going to keep cleaning up on the regional circuit. But I think Seery had kind of a breakthrough performance against Brad Pickett. I think that after kind of going up and down for the first part of his career and everything, he put on a good streak, got to the UFC, and really took it to Brad Pickett for good portions of that fight. And it's been a while since he lost to Phil Harris. That was his, I don't know. I mean, it was about mid in his career, but I think he's come along technically. So this is an interesting fight. It's basically going to be, can Phil Harris dominate Seery on the ground, or can Seery outbox Harris on the feet? And if Seery has the good enough takedown defense to stop Harris from taking him down, and Harris is not an exceptional takedown artist, then I think Seery's got a solid chance to win this. I don't know who's the underdog in this. I know we're not supposed to say yet, Dallas, but I'm curious to know.
I picked up enough of that to vaguely understand you. Series favored, minus 175, minus 165-ish. Phil Harris at around plus 140, 145-ish.
And see, that's interesting because, Harris has the win over Seery, but Harris has also looked really, really bad in his last two fights. He's looked like he does not belong in the UFC. Whereas Seery's first UFC fight was kind of a nothing but a claim that he does belong in the UFC. So this is like a big, this would be a great main event for a regional circuit because it's like a big turning point fight for both guys. You know what I mean? It's a pivotal moment for both of them.
Definitely.
Seery, I'm picking Seery.
For me, I mean, I think the big thing for me is that since their first fight was back in 2010, and since then I think that Seery's gotten better, and Phil Harris either hasn't or has gotten worse. He's just become, I mean, at some point the wheels fall off. He's been in the game since 2003, and 35 fights in, even though he's actually 3 years younger than Seery and has only been fighting for 2 years longer, at some point you slow down. And I think that's kind of what we've seen with Harris recently, that Gaudenau and Lineker, and obviously Lineker is one of the better fighters at 125, both just ran over him. And I think, Seery started his career, I think he's up at like 155 or something like really a lot bigger than he is right now. And so he's been slowly on like this getting into the right weight class thing. I mean, let's see, Seery, I don't know when his flyweight debut was, but even against Harris, they weren't at flyweight. They were at, I think, at bantamweight. So he really hasn't come down to flyweight until recently, and he's looked way better. His skills have translated way better there.
It was just 3 fights ago. Carl Harrison was his first flyweight fight.
Carl Harrison. So yeah, I mean, he hasn't fought at flyweight until just recently, and I think, I think that basically if he remembers his first fight with Phil Harris well, he should be expecting to face the exact same person now. Whereas if Phil Harris remembers that fight, I think that Phil Harris is going to be facing a much better fighter this time around. So I think that this should be Seery's fight to lose.
All right, so just a heads up, I was having major technical difficulties. Zane, your audio was funny when both you guys talked. It was your logo instead of your face, but I was just going to warn you, but now all of a sudden everything seems to be good. So just a heads up, if something goes wrong, it's my fault and you need to save the show. All right, so I already did the betting odds for both of those guys. Up next in this fight is going to be the, I guess, the headliner for the preliminary card, even though the whole show is on Fight Pass. This one at the top of the preliminary card, which starts at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. That's all the fights we've discussed thus far, concluding with this match, Chris Dempsey versus Ilir Latifi. And then after we cover this one, we're going to move on to the main card, which starts on Fight Pass at 3 p.m. Eastern. So Dempsey and Latifi. Zane, what's up?
All right. Well, yeah, Chris Dempsey, this is not a knock on Chris Dempsey at all, but this is a very good sign of just how bad regional light heavyweight is right now. That the only guys they've been able to find to fight on short notice, especially, are regional middleweights. And that's exactly who Chris Dempsey is. I mean, that's who Keith Barish was. That's who, Roger Narvaez was. All they're getting are regional middleweights to fight at light heavyweight on short notice. And Latifi, even to his credit, could probably be a regional middleweight, but with the amount of natural strength and muscle he has in his compact frame, he's actually pretty well suited to light heavyweight. He's got no real reason to drop down at all. And I think he's just going to smash Chris Dempsey, quite honestly. I mean, Latifi's not the most technical guy in the world, at least not striking from distance, but he's massively powerful. And if he's facing somebody who's even slightly undersized for his division, it's just not going to be a close fight.
Connor, agree, disagree?
Sounds good to me. I honestly, it's a shame for Chris Dempsey because as a regional middleweight, he's a solid regional level middleweight. I mean, he's got some pretty impressive wins. He hasn't beat a lot of guys with overwhelmingly winning records, but even the ones with losing records are generally veteran fighters who've really run the gamut. So he's, hopefully for him, if he does lose to Latifi, it won't be such a crushing loss that then it messes up his next UFC fight where he will hopefully go down to middleweight and have time to cut. I wouldn't be certain that he'll lose to Latifi, but he's a guy who's got good ground acumen, and that's Latifi's real strong point. But the thing is like Latifi is the guy who you hate to have in your jiu-jitsu class. You know what I mean? Because he's not super technical on the ground. I mean, every choke he hits is basically a neck crank more than a choke. He's just a crushing force, though. I mean, he really is, as Zane said, he's very powerful and compact. He's like a bulldog. And so he's a tough person for almost anybody to fight unless you're an excellent striker like Gegard Mousasi and you can keep him at arm's length. And I don't think that Chris Dempsey has the rangy striking necessary to do that. I think that Latifi is confident enough to run through people who aren't on that Mousasi level of stick and move fighting, who can't put that kind of pressure on him, who can't get inside his head like that. Sorry for Chris Dempsey. Hope he gets a better second time out, but I think this one's probably going to be Ilir Latifi, and probably with some kind of really painful-looking submission in like the second round.
And it's everything you're talking about. It's a bit of a bummer for Latifi too, because we don't really get to know his skills and where he's at in the division. If you're bringing in a middleweight to fight him, but either way, who knows? Could be a good matchup here. The odds are closer than I expected. Latifi's right around -200, and Dempsey's averaging +160 to about +175. So maybe the odds makers know something that we do not.
Well, I guess maybe they're looking at Dempsey's good, really solid regional record and thinking that he might be really competitive here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it sucks to me because none of these guys that they brought up lately have won any of their fights, but they really are having to pluck out regional middleweights. Like there just aren't any. There's nobody fighting at 205 anymore.
All right, we're moving on to the main card now, and this is an interesting one. Coming back after 7-8 years. I think it was the UFC 70s. Man, so what? Pride, ZST vet. I mean, the list goes on. Naoki Kotani is coming back to fight in Norman Park. Talk about a generational gap
Old
between
school
these two.
rings vet. We're talking 2,000 rings.
Yeah, he's 33-10. Shitload of fights. In Savvy, I think he's still only in his early 30s, so probably a lot. There's no way you can't have a lot of mileage, and he's fought some big names.
Yep.
Masvidal and the Astra Farewell to Yoshida show. He had a run in the UFC, did not do well, but again fought some big names. And he's taking on a tougher Norman Park. So Zane, start us off on this one.
Well, Kotani is an old school catch wrestling based guy. I don't know where he learned catch. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit before the show. I don't know where that comes from. He trains out of Rodeo Team MMA in Japan, some tiny camp that I've never heard of. But you watch him fight. I mean, and you go back and watch his. I went back and watched his UFC bouts. Against Thiago Tavares in particular. I don't know that I watched this one against Dennis Seaver, where Seaver knocked him out, which there's no shame in that, especially, early era Dennis Seaver when Seaver was, Seaver's been basically kind of a monster all the way through when he gets his range, and Kotani's not a great striker, but he was competitive with Thiago Tavares. That was a close fight. And Kotani's got heavy hands. He throws well when he's got his time and he's got time to work. And he's just got a really funky, weird grappling style with that catch base. He's really good at sweeping. He's really good at finding tricky submission setups. He's good at working out of odd positions, at catching guys when they don't expect it. And, I mean, he's just a fun guy to watch. Unfortunately, like a lot of long-time Japanese circuit vets, he tends to fight at a really slow pace. He tends to be really look for that perfect setup, that perfect time, that perfect place to generate offense. And if he doesn't have that perfect time and place, he's not necessarily gonna deliver in the way you would hope he would. But he's dangerous and he's weird and he's a good matchup for Park, who's shown himself to be one of the better wrestlers coming out of the UK scene in a long time, and who has also shown that he doesn't work terribly well at distance. He's more of a phone booth. He's developed a really nice, also the wall and brawl game kind of thing, where he's good at getting a guy up against the cage and hitting little inside short uppercuts, working for takedowns, working with top control, going with ground and pound, stuff like that. Not a finisher at all. So I expect Kotani will have a lot of time to work, and hopefully we'll make a good, fun, interesting fight out of it. And I'd love to see him grab a submission.
Connor, lay it on us.
I kind of disagree a little bit there. It's our first controversy of the card, but I think that this is a rough matchup for Kotani. I think that Park's not going to finish him, so he may give him the time to work, but I don't think he's going to give him the time to think or the space to breathe that Kotani's used to having from his opponents. As we say, like in the Japanese circuit, everybody fights at this slow pace. Norman Park does not do that. Norman Park is an in-your-face pressure fighter, whether it's like actual physical contact pressure, he's pushing you around, shoving you into the fence, trying to take you down, hitting you with knees, elbows, short uppercuts on the inside, or if it's at range, and you're backpedaling, he's constantly coming forward, throwing that straight left, throwing body kicks. I mean, I've been really impressed with Norman Park. I think he's come along very well. Is he American Top Team? I want to say that he is Alliance.
Oh, he's a lot. Yeah, he's Drysdale Jiu-Jitsu actually.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if he's training anywhere else as well.
I'm almost certain he's done Alliance as well. I believe he was coached by Alliance in his last fight.
Alliance as well. Yeah, Alliance and Drysdale. And
the biggest thing I've seen from him is that Alliance has done a really good job. That camp has done a great job, not only improving his striking, which has come along by leaps and bounds, but by integrating it into his style. So his striking he's very good at, much like Ronda Rousey, he'll use his punches and kicks to enter into range. He will use a slip. He's got decent head movement too, and he'll slip one of your punches and use that to tie you up. So it's very difficult to attack Norman Park or to engage him on the feet without him wrapping you up, and he's virtually impossible to take down. Taking him down is it's like pulling a tree stump out of the ground. I mean, he's just rooted to the floor. He has an excellent base. And if he does go down, his back is to the cage and he's getting right back up. So I don't think that I like Kotani, but I don't think that this is a very winnable fight for him. I don't think he's going to be able to deal with the style of Norman Park, and I don't think this fight will even go to the ground long enough for him to work his awesome catch wrestling submission game, because I imagine that he'll spend most of the fight being pinned to the fence by Norman Park and just kind of mauled with knees to the legs and little short.
Oh yeah, well I guess I should preface this that I don't.
You can't preface it afterwards, Zane.
I can't preface it afterward. I guess I should have prefaced my opinion with the fact that I don't think there are many. I mean, when you're talking about somebody coming off the Japanese MMA circuit that's fairly specialized, you're not talking about a lot of guys off the bottom rung of the UFC ladder that they're going to match up well with.
Yeah.
That's the truth. And I don't think that Kotani is necessarily going to I don't think he's going to beat Park at all. But I'm hoping, because Park is the kind of guy who's going to give him a lot of time to work, even if he's not going to give him a lot of space to work, that it'll at least make an interesting fight out of it because of it. I mean, I don't see a lot of better matchups for him if you're talking about guys who aren't just at the very bottom end of the UFC. I don't think Park's a good matchup, but I don't see a lot of better ones.
Well, the betting odds are pretty heavily tilted for Norman Park. I believe the biggest favorite on the card thus far, minus 325 in that range. Ooh, even up to minus 350 in some spots. Kotani getting little love, plus almost plus 250 all the way across the board. So I didn't know Kotani was, until Zane brought that up before the show, a catch specialist or even had a base in that. Because to me, he always reminded me of like just like the classic Pancrase style grappler, where he had okay striking, but just like a berserk kamikaze, but highly technical. A guy that has skills. He's been grappling his whole life. In order for him to do something against Park here, I think he's going to have to really go outside of his comfort zone and go for something, because Park, just his combination of balance, punches, and takedown defense is going to be pretty tough for Kotani. It's not going to be the kind of cat he can come in winging punches and double leg. So I'd like to really see him pull something exciting out. It's not that I'd like to. I think that's really almost his only chance here. Let's move on to this next one, because it is a doozy. Ian McCall, Uncle Creepy, the former #1 flyweight in the world before the UFC got into the flyweight business, versus Brad One Punch Pickett, looking good at flyweight. Connor, I think it's your turn on this one.
You think Pickett's looking good at flyweight, Dallas?
Well, I mean, first of all, you can't do, you know what I mean? He needed an avenue to kind of refresh his career, and that's, I think, exactly what he did. He's doing better now, I think, than even, I don't know if he's going to stay here, but he made the cut. He didn't look too emaciated. I do think that guys underestimate how fast the flyweights are when you go down. You think I'm going to be bigger, stronger, I can punch. I fought these big guys. These flyweights will run circles around your ass, and they are game, and they're tough to get a hold of to mount any offense on. So that was my long defensive answer to your question, Connor.
It was a very long way of saying, get off my case.
Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe, and as I was bullshitting, I was thinking, why did he do something and look shitty? But back to where we were. Connor, your thoughts on the matchup?
Boy, I think Brad Pickett's pretty clearly on the decline at this point in his career. I think the height of his ability was around the time that he fought Demetrius Johnson. I think that was probably the best performance of his career, when he completely out-wrestled Mighty Mouse and took him down at will and just used his size and strength. And he still has size and strength at the flyweight, but he does not have the speed. And he really did get outworked for large portions of the fight against Neil Seery. I think really all he has going for him anymore at flyweight is his size, which he needs his wrestling, to get in on somebody to take advantage of that. And Ian McCall is not a guy that you want to be banking on your grappling only to beat. That's a rough, especially because McCall himself is an excellent wrestler. I mean, he was competitive in the wrestling with Demetrius Johnson. Almost nobody else at flyweight has done that. So
or bantamweight besides Dominic Cruz, and that was mostly belly-to-back suplexes, and he snuck
Pickett.
out. Am I right?
Yeah. Brad Pickett was competitive with him. I mean, he dominated him.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, I was going off on your other comment.
But I think, against Eddie Wineland, split decision against Mike Easton. The Michael McDonald fight, he did not look good. And then the Neil Seery fight, he looked less impressive than expected. And that could be a sign of how good Seery really is, but I think it's a combination of the two, that Pickett is just not the fighter he used to be. And, granted, Ian McCall hasn't exactly had the UFC run that he probably hoped for. He was probably hoping to start his UFC career off a lot better, but he was competitive, at least in all of his losses. And honestly, I think the big thing has been, in several of his fights, he just hasn't really looked like he's cared about winning. It's almost like he's, like in the last Mighty Mouse fight and in the Benavidez fight, even in the Santos fight a little bit, he was just kind of coasting for large portions of the fight. He didn't seem to have a sense of urgency. We saw more of that against Santos but Benavidez was really kind of a weird performance from him. He kind of just let Benavidez fight his fight. And it was a big contrast to the first fight with Demetrius Johnson, when he was very competitive and was really trying to kick Mighty Mouse's ass and was wrestling with him and going wherever the fight went and really dictating. He was doing the Uncle Creepy thing. So it's tough to see where Ian McCall's at, but I think he's pretty definitively better than Brad Pickett at this point. the win against Iliarde Santos proves that he's still got it. The fact that he was somewhat competitive with Benavidez, relatively competitive with Demetrius Johnson, all of that proves to me that he's better than Brad Pickett, particularly at his natural weight class of 125, where Pickett, I don't think, I think Pickett's probably a natural bantamweight. So, Ian McCall by unanimous decision. Zane?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the McCall thing is really that once he gets hit in the face, I think he feels like he's in a fight now, and he doesn't have to care about actually like game planning or whatever plans he has. Like, oh, now I'm in a fight. Let's just fight and have fun. This is awesome, and that just seems to be like where he goes. Because I mean, even in Iliardi Santos, he was schooling him early, and then he got hit a couple times. You could see he started smiling and like, let's just get in the pocket and throw down. And so that's always a problem, but honestly, I think even if that happens with Pickett, I don't think Pickett has the tools right now to take advantage, and I could see this fight looking a lot like the Iliarde Santos fight, where Ian McCall is comfortably, but not comfortably ahead, but not way out ahead. It just kind of coasts to a 3-round decision. Actually,
I do want to pick up on what you said there, because I think the one advantage that Pickett has in this fight is a mentality, because I think that Pickett does not care about getting hit, and he is completely willing to get hit to hit you. And I think what you pointed out about McCall is a pretty big sign that he does not like getting hit. And I think when you hit him, he gets like this insecurity going on, and he's like, okay, now I have to prove that I'm better than you. It becomes a whole, like, I'm fighting against myself kind of thing, whereas Pickett is always trying to get you. His focus is always on walking through whatever you throw and getting to you. So,
but McCall's such a good wrestler and has such a solid base and is so fast and athletic that I just don't worry about the fact that he will give Pickett those opportunities. I don't think Pickett can take advantage of them.
Exactly. I think McCall will probably spend a good early portion of this fight using his kicks and stuffing takedowns, and I don't think Pickett's fast enough to get in with his hands and do the kind of, because he would need to hit McCall early to put McCall into now I'm defending myself mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Take him out of his game plan.
All right, just some comments on that discussion, which I'm not being a smartass, was good fight shit. First on Pickett, when he came down, he's always been a 3-dimensional fighter, and I always thought he didn't get credit for that because he one punch, so obviously the dude knows how to throw his hands, but he's a good wrestler, as evidenced by the DJ fight. And I mean, he hit a Peruvian necktie back in the WEC, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's when he was coming over and training with ATT.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, solid all the way across the board, and I thought, wow, he's going to be a good fit for flyweights because you cannot have any holes in your game. Random observation there. Actually, here's a couple more. I think Pickett is probably the more artful boxer than McCall, not necessarily the better one. He's more dynamic and diverse, but he has a tendency to get a little kind of loopy and noodly with a lot of outside, where McCall is, I think, an excellent example of basic and effective boxing. The only thing he doesn't do, and this was real obvious in the DJ fight, DJ had his hands up by his jaw and his chin, where McCall's hands were always at the very highest, maybe to his chin. And that gets him sometimes in trouble. It's better for defending takedowns or shooting. Again, I'm just like machine gunning on all the things you guys said. I think for all fighters, like the get punched in the face versus strategy thing is a tough road to find, because we see fighters first make it into the big leagues and they think, I can't just go out and flow anymore and fight. I need to be smart and have a strategy. And now, I mean, I'm hearing more fighters say, all this have a super well-crafted strategy is kind of like not my thing. I mean, some people do it, but I want to have some basic do's and don'ts, areas that I do work well in, but not feel like I'm refined to only having this pathway. And if the fight's going down this area, I'm in trouble and I need to get out of there. So just random thoughts on that in McCall. And I say that because to me, he was the #1 flyweight, but it's a whole new world for him now, because now he's fighting guys, the best in the world. Really, McCall could be exactly where he was before, because Benavidez and DJ were all up at bantamweight. So McCall could be just as much of a beast as he as he used to be, but he's fighting the elite of the elite that were fighting in a higher weight class before. And I don't really, there's certain things that he could have done better, but I mean, when you're fighting guys like DJ and Joseph Benavidez, to me, those are the number 1 and number 2 flyweights in the world right now. Just my opinion. Unless I think, Pickett peels something off early, but McCall's real durable, man. Even though I like Pickett, I don't know whether he's declined. I'm feeling real strong towards McCall here. Sounds like you guys all are as well.
Yeah, very much so.
I hate it when I say something long and everyone's like, "Yep."
No, okay.
I'm just kidding.
I wanted to get to with the hands thing, just because, like, I mean, I think the problem for me with McCall is not so much that he carries his hands low, which obviously, I mean, personally, I kind of like that for fighters because I do think it's better for wrestling and all that. But it's that when he gets hit, he stops moving in and out of range. He stops changing distance. He stops like trying to slip punches, and he just sort of like gets stuck in the pocket, and he just kind of like gets upright and starts throw. I mean, it's like it's something that Abel Trujillo does too. He really is like a much easier to notice.
Trujillo is absolutely the same as McCall. I'm really glad you brought that up because he's absolutely the same mentality-wise. I'll borrow a phrase from my like boxing mentor Luis Monda. When guys like Abel Trujillo and Ian McCall fight somebody who can do their thing as well as them, the penises come out. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you hit me? My dick's bigger than yours now. I'm going to prove it to you. Like, it's like they're not comfortable, so they have to, like, when Abel Trujillo fought Jamie Varner, it was really clear that he did not like being hit, and he was so uncomfortable that all technique went out the window. He just went into, like, I've got to win this fight, like uber masculine male dominance mode. And Ian McCall does the same shit. He takes a big shot, and like he's no longer the crafted fighter that he was. He decides that he has to prove he's better than that guy at what that guy just did to him.
Yeah, and so it's not even so much like a defensive like positioning or like, oh, these, technical tools that he lacks or that he doesn't do it quite as well. Because like he showed in the first DJ fight, he can be a really technical fighter and a really dominating technical fighter at times. It's that he just is willing to scrap it all for a fun fight.
And to me, it was his striking that really opened that up, because I actually think wrestling and scrambles and transitions are his game, and he came out and tried to impose that on Mighty Mouse, and it wasn't working, and he had to settle down and strike. And when he did it in the first match, he did it technically. Excellent movement, unpredictable entries. And Connor and I have talked about this. I'm not the kind of guy that thinks at all moments in the cage you have to have your hands up. Contrast his first and second fight. In the second fight, he had his hands low, and DJ kept tagging him in the face. So it'll be interesting, though, to see how he does, I think, in this kind of fight, because those were high-pressure fights for him, coming in as a guy the hardcores knew used to be on top of the heap. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing, how he performs.
I do think he is very much the same fighter he was when he was ruling Tachi Palace, though. I don't think he's fallen off at all. I think that it is just a function of the better talent at bantamweight dropping down to flyweight.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see, this is a good, because really, I mean, this is another bantamweight dropping down, although, a less imposing one. So maybe, McCall doesn't need to make a ton of adjustments, and he can still be that same way. Either way, I'm really looking forward to finding out. I'm looking forward to that fight maybe more than any other on the card. The main event, obviously, is going to be a good one. All right, we got 2 more to squeeze in here. Now, remember my new battery rule. We're limited on time because I feel like I've been sitting here all afternoon. And that's not a knock on you guys. I enjoyed it. Zach Cummings and Gunnar Nelson. I'm going to go real quickly on this one because I do want to say I was super impressed with Zach Cummings in his last fight. I thought he made really, and maybe it's that I didn't pick up on him before, really big improvements to his striking. I was impressed, and then just one of those things that stood out after this marquee win, they showed him. He stopped on his victory walk out to take a picture with like some little kid and signing an autograph. So just one of those little things that really upped my respect for the dude, because that little kid will remember that shit for the rest of his life. However, I mean, it's one of those where, of course, it's possible he could catch him and win, but Gunnar Nelson, I'm not all on his hype train like he's going to blow everybody away, but I do think that this is a highly favorable matchup for him. That being said, who's going? Who wants it?
Connor.
I'll jump on it. I also was impressed with Zach Cummings, although I think I did have a little inkling of what he was capable of before that. He still has been steadily progressing, technically speaking, and I think one of his greatest attributes is that I may be just saying this because he looks like Ilir Latifi a lot, but like Latifi, I think that Cummings is strong as an ox, and
Yeah.
I think he is a very difficult guy to contend with physically when it hits the ground. And the good thing we saw in his last fight is that after a lot of grappling, we've seen that he maintains that strength throughout the fight. So he is very difficult to deal with at all stages. And I actually think that he's got a similar striking style to Gunnar Nelson, although Gunnar Nelson has the very idiosyncratic Goju-Ryu, is that what he did? Goju-Ryu karate stance. He's got that, the hands low, chin really high up in the air, like this bare knuckle boxing stance. Despite that, the weapons they choose are very similar. I mean, they're both southpaws. They both tend to paw with their jab and throw straight lefts. They like to counter, but they also know how to come forward and take angles off that left hand. They both have a decent left kick. Tough fight. I mean, Nelson's solid on the feet, and he's got a hell of a chin, and Zach Cummings is now proven to be solid on the feet, and he's got a hell of a chin too. Both guys are great grapplers. Cummings is not as technical as Nelson, but he's almost certainly far stronger and has stamina as well. Nelson, also great stamina, but hugely advantaged in the technique. I've got to say Nelson, but I think this is actually a pretty fun competitive matchup, and I think even if Cummings, my likely prediction is that Cummings will lose, but will look pretty solid in the process, that he will give Nelson an interesting fight. I think this one will probably go to decision, and it'll be a fun back and forth grappling match, or will be a late submission for Gunnar Nelson.
Yeah, I gotta agree, honestly. I mean, and I like Cummings a lot. I was actually pretty heavily picking him to beat Jan Cabral when they fought, because he's such a ridiculously strong wrestler, and he's shown over time that he has more than enough technical grappling knowledge to not only stay out of submissions, but to catch people in them too. And so I really like him. I like his base skills. I like how he works. I like how he fights. He's a fun fighter to watch. I do expect Nelson to win this, I think, just because I think he's a little trickier, a little faster, more diverse in his striking offense. But I think that Cummings is susceptible to getting swept and getting into some technical trouble on the ground, which I think Nelson can take advantage of and has more tools to when he does something advantageous on the ground, has more tools to take advantage of it than Cabral, who was able to sweep and able to reverse and able to do some things, but then if he couldn't get the submission, was kind of stuck. Like, he didn't have great ground and pound, didn't have other great tools to use once he had gotten an advantage. I think Nelson probably has a few more of those tools, so that when you're talking about another razor close fight against somebody who's a better technical grappler, I think Nelson pushes it in a way that Cabral just couldn't quite. But it's a very close fight, and the way that there is that feeling of the way that Nelson holds his head and holds his chin, and Cummings has some of this problem too. Either of them could get hit hard by something and get their legs taken out from under them. I think they both have good chins, but part of that too is just a product of youth and of not taking so many shots yet in their careers. So there could come a point when one of them gets tagged really hard and really tested because of it.
I think we've got a fun matchup of grappling styles here, because Gunnar Nelson is like the archetypal Rickson Gracie jiu-jitsu, where it's like really good sweeps, and once you get it, like, you hold on to top control and you beat the tar out of the guy until he gives you something, and if he doesn't give you a submission, you just keep beating him up until the fight's over. And with Zach Cummings, it's wrestler jiu-jitsu, where it's all about like headlock submissions and stuff like that, working out of that Greco clinch and getting to top control that way. So I'm glad you mentioned Nelson's sweeps, because I think that'll probably be the deciding factor. That was the one like glaring weakness that Cummings showed is
Mhm.
that he was pretty easy to sweep, and he was also very cunning at getting reversals after getting swept. But
Yeah.
I think some of that was more strength than technique, and
Yeah.
I think Nelson has dealt with enough meatheads in the gym in jiu-jitsu class to know how to stop somebody who's just a strong
Yeah.
guy.
Well,
He's so technical.
part of that too was that Cummings was really the first big grinding wrestler that Cabral had faced in MMA competition,
Yeah.
and I don't think he'll have that
It was
quite.
almost like Cabral was like admiring his work after he got a sweep and got caught sleeping. Like he was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that was pretty sweet. Now I'm in control," and then he got put in his back. Whereas
Yeah.
Nelson's he's a dickhead. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? In fights, he's really mean. Like he really wants to
Yeah.
finish you. So when he gets a position, that's not a sign for him to be happy with himself. That's a sign for him to advance further. It's just
Yeah.
when he starts crushing you, he starts crushing you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. Both the main and the co-main event of this card have the biggest favorites and underdogs by far. Gunnar Nelson's looking good, 470 all the way up to minus 500, and Zach Cummings is about plus 345, 350 range.
That's absurd.
And
Yeah.
let me, since just to kind of make that make sense, let me, as we segue into our main event here, Conor McGregor and Diego Brandao, almost identical odds, minus 450 to minus 430 for Conor, and Diego's about plus 330, plus 325-ish.
That's less
So
absurd.
it is, but I guess my overall just big picture, I guess conceptual view of both these fights, main event and co-main, have guys that are pretty heavily hyped. Probably the most heavily hyped European fighters we've had in the UFC. Am I wrong there? I'm pulling that off out of my ass, but
Gustafson maybe.
Yeah.
Did Gus really? I feel like he didn't have a lot of.
Manawa came in under a pretty big hype train. I mean, there have been some guys who've come in with hype.
But you're right. McGregor
Yeah, but-
and Nelson probably are
Yeah.
more than Manawa and Gustafson. That's
Yeah, that might be reasonable.
But okay, so continuing on my point, heavily hyped guys, but they're both facing guys who have the ability to, just simply put their lights out with their punching power and strength. Maybe more strength on Cummings, but Brandau's aggression. But the betting lines do not reflect that whatsoever. I think both of these are pretty. Both of those lines are pretty steep. Obviously, we all decided on who the favorite is, but that'll be interesting. I'm not really a big bettor, but there might be some. Well, I guess I don't know. It's always interesting when you see bouts that you feel are one way, but just landslides almost on the betting odds. They're not that bad, but compared to the rest of the card.
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest favorites on this card should be Ian McCall, Josh Sampo, and Ilir Latifi. Those are the three fights that if I had to pick them, I would say are pretty much locks. The rest of this, I mean, a lot of the rest of this card is a bit more competitive, but for Cummings Nelson to be that far apart, that to me is pretty surprising. McGregor Brandao does have that ability to do something scary, but it also really is highly dependent on what version of him shows up and how long that version of him stays composed.
So just continue. Talk about the matchup. Keep
All
going.
right. So yeah, Brandao. I mean, for a while I was really high on Diego Brandao. I really liked him a lot, especially just coming off the Ultimate Fighter when he beat Dennis Bermudez. His performances throughout that, even losing to Darren Elkins, that didn't take a lot of shine off him for me. It's really only I mean he's always had these problems that his attitude is totally always out of control. But his fight with Dustin Poirier was a really bad sign for his future. I mean, this was somebody who looked like had some severe personality control problems, but was reining them in to become a very competent and capable fighter in the UFC, and one who was dangerous not just in his striking, but in a really aggressive grappling style as well. And that Poirier fight, I mean, I don't know if his girlfriend left him. He's probably married, so I don't know if his wife left him or if his dog just died or if, something, but he was a complete mess, and he got taken apart like a complete mess. And if he's anywhere nearly as uncomposed against McGregor, McGregor's just going to do the exact same thing to him.
Connor?
I agree. I mean, if Brandao struggled with the composure and self-confidence that Dustin Poirier had, he's really not going to like the kind of absolute cocksure certainty in victory that Conor McGregor brings to the cage every single time that he fights. And I think that fighting Conor McGregor, people will love to say that he hasn't backed up what he hasn't backed up his talk. He doesn't deserve to be as cocky as he is right now. But I think once you fight him, you realize how certain he is that he's going to beat you, and how silly he's making you look. And it really, really gets demoralizing. And that is not a good sign for Diego Brandao, who I think is one of the least mentally strong fighters in the UFC right now. I think he's kind of got some noises happening on Dallas's end. I think.
Can you guys all hear that?
I heard something.
I didn't hear anything, but I don't have my.
There it is again.
I think that Brandao struggles with like self-confidence and relaxation more than anybody. I think that Greg Jackson's biggest struggle has been to just get him to calm the hell down, and it hasn't worked yet. Because like even when he wins, it's against guys that he can absolutely overpower. And when a guy doesn't get overpowered, that's when he struggles, and he looks exactly as bad every time that happens.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because, like Zayn, I mean, the first time I saw Brandao fight, I was like, wow, I like his stance. He throws powerful kicks, top control grappling, submissions. Like, he looks like a guy who has it all. And I don't even mind a guy who throws looping punches and stuff, because he throws them, to go around guards and stuff like that. He throws them relatively intelligently. He's got decent form, and he hits hard, obviously. But he just he doesn't even gas because he puts too much into every strike. He gasses because he gets worked up when you start to give him trouble. Like, he can't handle it, and then his whole psychology just falls apart the moment that you start to have success against him. And
it's like he loses his temper, am I right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
It's like he goes into a fit. Like, he just can't contain himself. He just he gets mad or distraught or something. And McGregor is so cool-headed and collected, and also just very, very technical. And he does put himself at risk with some of his style. He even got hit by Brimage in their fight. He got hit by Holloway plenty, and Brandao packs a lot of punch. And Brandao's a solid wrestler too, but I really think that this will be a competitive fight, maybe for about half a round, maybe for like 3 or 4 minutes of the fight, and then once it starts to go McGregor's way, I don't think that Brandao has the tools to reclaim the fight after it starts to slip out of his hands.
Yeah.
Any particular areas, and I was trying to think of, we know Brandao's a berserk striker, and anytime, a guy can hit that hard and is trying to take your head off, he'll have a chance to win, especially against a guy who will, in all likelihood, want to stand up with him. The only area I could think that Diego might be a little bit better, or might be a plus on him, was hand speed. And I'm not saying that's the case, but really?
I don't know. I think his, even if he does have an advantage in speed, which is questionable to begin with. Sorry, that sounds really harsh. I don't know if he does, but I think even given that, I think that he just telegraphs everything he does too much, especially when he starts to get hit. It's just like everything's a big power shot and there's not a setup. Whereas McGregor, very, very good at mixing speed, changing rhythm, taking angles. Even when standing in front of you, he's going to be finding an angle around your guard or past your punches to hit you and counter you. And also McGregor, I mean, he can pressure, he can move backwards and fight off the back foot. Really, I mean, Brandao has a chance to hurt him in the first round, but McGregor's got a chin, and I think also that he's so determined to win that if he does get hurt, it's not going to hurt his chances to come back the way that it would Brandao. Brandao just can't stage a rally. He can never muster up enough self-confidence to rally in a fight. He loses it.
Yeah, so I didn't take offense to that because, I mean, the whole point was trying to dig up, dredge up one area that, might look good for Diego.
I think the way that I could see Brandao really winning this, if he can't put McGregor's lights out with one Hail Mary punch, and that's never something that you should really be betting on with anybody, if you're looking at a way that they could win, I would say the best chance he has is that because he does have such a dynamic submission offense, there's a chance that Brandao gets hurt, and if McGregor chases him over eagerly into his guard, Brandao could hook up a triangle, an arm, or like a triangle choke or an arm bar if McGregor's not. If McGregor isn't being really patient and judicious in his ground and pound, but McGregor has shown pretty good ability in developing and evolving ability to be controlling from top control and to be controlling with his ground and pound, so I'm not terribly worried about that.
He also showed some flashes of like Anderson Silva-esque precision with his ground strikes. When he finished Brimage, he was like moving into knee on belly and like half back control, staying at an angle even when the guy was hurt on the ground, not giving him a chance to get guard, and just raining down straight punches on him from like a postured standing position. He's very dangerous once he has you hurt.
But I mean, Brandao is exceptionally good at just following through a roll. If he's into like if it's a scramble on the ground, he's exceptionally good at finding a really quick submission opportunity. That is one of the things that one of the reasons I really like watching Brandao fight is because, you know, you give him that inch of space in a scramble, and he'll find the submission opportunity.
All right, fellas, I'm ready to wrap this up. I love you both. When we scheduled this for 2 o'clock, I didn't expect to be staring at my computer at 3:45. That being said, any final comments? Anything else you guys want to add?
Now I think we've worked this over pretty thoroughly.
We have. We gave it the old... You know, and the other thing Nate was going to fire me for is if I didn't start plugging the show more. So if you watch us on YouTube, give us a like. And you can't say give us a like. Nate always has to throw in that hand symbol. Sorry, Nate. I don't know why. You're just an easy target when you're not here. I'm at Uncle Justice on Twitter. Zane Simon is at the Zane Simon. Yes.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Connor the Rabbi is Boxing Bush, with a heavy emphasis on the B-U-C-H. So it's like the beer. It's like boxing and beer.
B-U-S-C-H, yeah. Yeah, drunken boxing.
Drunken boxing, there you go. See, it's code. He's talking in code words over there. All right, I'm exhausted. I don't have anything else to say unless you guys do. I will bid you good day, and we will reconvene whenever the next face-punching event is, yeah?
Good day, sir.
Good day, gentlemen. Thanks for watching.